Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change as being among the most vulnerable ecosystems to climate change. It is henceforth understood that the higher the altitude, the more perceptible the effects of climate change. Mountainous areas are the reservoirs of our planet and are rich yet very fragile areas of biodiversity. In spite of the precious ecosystem services provided, mountains are yet to be accorded the appropriate level of attention in processes within the UN. They are chronically underrepresented in the global observation system. Mountains must therefore become a priority as part of global action. And this is the reason why we have worked over recent months to emphasize the vulnerability of mountains and to ensure that they have their rightful place in the global agenda. We will continue to do so because when it comes to those among us who live in mountainous regions or who depend on mountainous regions, we also need to have a future. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure now to welcome His Eminence, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Secretary of State of the Holy See. Your Eminence, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. I am going to read an extract of the address that Pope Francis was to deliver here, which will then be published in full. Mr. President, distinguished heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, sadly, I am unable to be present with you as I had greatly desired. Now, more than ever, the future of us all depends on the present that we now choose. The destruction of the environment is an offense against God, a sin that is not only personal but also structural, one that greatly endangers all human beings, especially the most vulnerable in our midst, and threatens to unleash a conflict between generations. We must answer now these questions. Are we working for a culture of life or a culture of death? To all of you, I make this heartfelt appeal. Let us choose life. Let us choose the future. Yet, a world completely connected like ours today should not be unconnected by those who govern it, with international negotiations that cannot make significant progress due to positions taken by countries which place their national interests above the global common good. Particularly striking in this regard are the attempts made to shift the blame onto the poor and high birth rates. It is not the fault of the poor, since the almost half of our world that is more needy is responsible for scarcely 10% of greenhouse gas emissions, while the gap between the opulent few and the masses of the poor has never been so abysmal. The poor are the real victims of what is happening. We need to think only of the plight of indigenous peoples, deforestation, the tragedies of hunger, water and food insecurity, and forced migration. Birds are not a problem, but a resource. They are not opposed to life, but for life, whereas certain ideological and utilitarian models now being imposed with a velvet glove on families and peoples constitute real forms of colonization. The development of many countries already burdened by grave economic debt should not be penalized. Instead, we should consider the footprint of a few nations responsible for a deeply troubling ecological debt towards many others. It would only be fair to find suitable means of remitting the financial debts that burden different peoples, not least in light of the ecological debt that they are owed. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to speak to you as brothers and sisters in the name of the common home in which we live, and to ask these questions. What is the way out of this? It is the one that you are pursuing in these days, the way of togetherness, multilateralism. It is essential to rebuild trust, which is the foundation of multilateralism. This is true in the case of care for creation, but also that of peace. These are the most urgent issues, and they are closely linked. How much energy is humanity wasting on the numerous wars presently in course? How many resources are being squandered on weaponry that destroys lives or devastates our common home? Once more, I present this proposal. With the money spent on weapons and other military expenditure, let us establish a global fund that can finally put an end to hunger and carry out works for the sustainable development of the poorer countries and for combating climate change. It is up to this generation to heed the cry of peoples, the young and children, and to lay the foundations of a new multilateralism. Why not begin precisely for our common home? Climate change signals the need for a political change. Let us emerge from the narrowness of self-interest and nationalism. These are approaches belonging to the past. Let us join in embracing an alternative vision. This will help to bring about an ecological conversion, for there are no lasting changes without cultural changes. In this regard, I would assure you of the commitment and support of the Catholic Church, which is deeply engaged in the work of education and of encouraging participation by all, as well as in promoting sound lifestyles, since all are responsible and the contribution of each is fundamental. Brothers and sisters, it is essential that there be a breakthrough that is not a partial change of course, but rather a new way of making progress together. May this COP prove to be a turning point, demonstrating a clear and tangible political will that can lead to a decisive acceleration of ecological transition through means that meet three requirements. They must be efficient, obligatory, and readily monitored, and achieved in 4 sectors: energy efficiency, renewable resources, the elimination of fossil fuels, and education in lifestyles that are less dependent on the latter. Please, let us move forward and not turn back. You are responsible for crafting policies that can provide concrete and cohesive responses, and in this way demonstrate the nobility of your role and the dignity of the service that you carry out. In the end, the purpose of power is to serve. It is useless to cling to an authority that will one day be remembered for its inability to take action when it was urgent and necessary to do so. History will be grateful to you. May the year 2044 mark the breakthrough. I like to think that a good omen can be found in an event that took place in 1224. In that year, Francis of Assisi composed his Canticle of the Creatures. By then, Francis was completely blind, and after a night of physical sufferings, his spirits were elevated by a mystical experience. He then turned to praise the Most High for all those creatures that he could no longer see, but knew that they were his brothers and sisters, since they came forth from the same Father. Shortly thereafter, he praised God for those who forgive. I too, who bear the name Francis, with the heartfelt urgency of a prayer, want to leave you with this message. Let us leave behind our divisions and unite our forces. And with God's help, let us emerge from the dark night of wars and environmental devastation in order to turn our common future into the dawn of a new and radiant day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda, Prime Minister of Nepal. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. At the outset, I congratulate the presidency of this COP28 for hosting this conference and thank the government of UAE for extending a warm hospitality to my delegation. Madam President, I bring the message of 30 million Nepali people to this conference. Our message is clear. Mountains are tortured by rising temperature. Save them first. I am deeply concerned about the finding of the recent IPCC report that states climate-induced disaster breaking records in the Himalayas. We have already lost 1/3 of our glaciers, and scientists have warned that we are going to lose another 1/3 by the end of this century. This is a wake-up call to all of us. The Himalayas are foundation of human civilization, ecosystem, and biodiversity. They are providing global services to the people and the planet and are the source of livelihood for billions of people downstream. Madam President, Nepal is bearing a direct, disproportionate, the damaging effect of climate change despite near zero contribution to global emissions. Due to an appalling injustice inflicted on us, our people are severely affected by climate-induced disasters such as landslide, floods, wildfire, glacier lake outburst, drought, etc. This is an utter injustice. This must stop now. In his opening remarks yesterday, the United Nations Secretary General said, and I quote, "Just days ago, I was on the melting ice of Antarctica. Not long ago, I was among the melting glaciers of Nepal. These two spots are far in distance, but united in the crisis," unquote. Similarly, in his recent visit to Nepal, he said further, and I quote, "Stop war against the nature," unquote. This was his reaction after having witnessed the disastrous impact of climate change in the mountains. Indeed, it is a war against nature as well as humanity. We are waging war with ourselves and the future generation only to satisfy our short-sighted and self-serving interest. So, I stand here for climate justice for my innocent people who are sheer victim of this catastrophe. Madam President, recently I unveiled the National Adaptation Plan and NDC implementation guideline with clear roadmap and strategies. Nepal is fully committed to the Paris Agreement. We are committed to achieving a net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2045, 5 years earlier than the global target. We will fully utilize our hydropower potential to secure the clean energy and maintain 45% forest covered land. However, our attempts to implement climate change adaptation and mitigation plans are facing serious financial and technological gaps. LDCs are more vulnerable to the impact of the climate change and are in desperate need of financial and technological support. As the chair of the LDCs, I urge the developed economies and international community for more predictable, adequate, and equitable resource and technologies for LDCs. Countries like Nepal are left behind to live on their own fate. Therefore, I want to reiterate the following points. Number one, developed countries' pledges and action do not correspond with each other. They must raise their ambitions and fulfill their commitment urgently. Number two, they must scale up climate finance to make up for the US $100 billion shortfall and double the adaptation finance by 2025. And ensure fair financial arrangement without condition, constant, and compliance. Third, we demand grants as our justice to address this crisis. The loss and damage fund must be predictable, simplified, and adequate for LDCs and mountainous countries. The GST report must give a clear roadmap to all, and we must act in solidarity with urgency. Number six, finally, I strongly recommend the necessity of initiating a dialogue on mountain and climate change. I wish a grand success of this conference. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I would kindly like to remind the speakers to hold their speech within 3 minutes. And now it's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Petr Fiala, Prime Minister of Czechia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me thank the United Arab Emirates for hosting this critical conference. Climate change is one of the biggest global challenges of our time. Risks linked to it affect everyone, but some regions face higher dangers than others. Our partners across the world deal with serious challenges, from extreme weather to lack of water, which I saw during my visit to Africa last month. This is why we support the UN Secretary General's early warnings for all. It is a bold vision. It says that everyone should be protected from weather, water, or climate hazards by 2027. By the same year, Czechia is ready to give $4 million for the activities of the Green Climate Fund. It will help developing countries to face climate change and adapt to its impacts. My country supports the Paris Agreement of the EU climate and energy goals, including the goal of carbon-neutral economy by 2050. We are taking steps to stop coal for electricity and heating by 2033. In part, this can be achieved by renovating buildings and developing renewable energy sources. But I want to be clear that the success of our wider climate goals is fundamentally dependent on nuclear energy. This is a good thing. Nuclear power is both reliable and clean, so we should use its benefits. One way is the development of a new generation of modular reactors. A global nuclear renaissance can be an effective solution for our challenges. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there are many links between the environment, sustainable living conditions, and the global peace. We cannot have one without another. We should keep that in mind when we try to solve global problems and when we help people out of poverty and adapt to climate change. As a top priority, we must always collaborate internationally, and we must innovate and research for a better life for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Robert Abela, Prime Minister of Malta. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, colleagues, distinguished guests, and more importantly of all, dear friends. Allow me to start by thanking and also congratulating the leadership of the United Arab Emirates for the COP28's impeccable organization and also for the ambitious outcomes the COP presidency aims to achieve. Science has always been very clear, but today we are not just dealing about possible shocking events. Today we are dealing with an alarming reality that some of us have been going through, particularly coming from a country within the Mediterranean basin like Malta, who have experienced one of the most challenging summers in history. It was during the COP21 in Paris that the momentum for putting a cap of not more than 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature was set. This is no mean feat, but by acting seriously together, we can achieve the ambitious targets that we have set. Malta is one of the smallest islands in the world, with an area of around 316 square kilometers. Potentially, it can be one of the worst hit too. Being small does not mean that we should do less. We understand the challenges in front of us and the responsibility that we have. That's why we are punching far above our weight. Being a European Union member state, we are working hard to achieve a 55% emission reduction by 2030 as compared to 1990 levels. Malta has also achieved a lot in these past years, but we want to be more ambitious and to do much more. Having the lowest gross emission per capita among the EU member states means that our efforts need to be sturdier. In the past 10 years, we have managed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from the energy sector by 60%. We have increased our renewable energy share from 10 megawatts in 2012 to 230 megawatts in 2021. However, that is not enough. We want and we will do more with ambitious projects in the pipeline. Our onshore area, true, is quite limited. Our offshore potential, however, is immense. This does not come without its own challenges, particularly when it comes to the bathymetry around our islands. But challenges make us push and work harder. Saying that we want to be climate neutral by 2050 is a conviction we are working hard on. We are committed more than ever in having the first global stocktake during COP28 that can truly help us achieve the systematic changes we need to to reach our ambitions. Change requires reforms, particularly when it comes to unlocking private financial investments to achieve climate neutrality and to make sure that we channel the right financial flows through global economic systems, ensuring accessibility by the most vulnerable states. We will always walk the talk. Nationally, our very own water utility company has been one of the very first European utility companies to issue green bonds for retail investors. Internationally, in the past 4 years, Malta has doubled its contribution to the Green Climate Fund twice. Today, 17% of our overseas development aid is earmarked for capacity building in adaptation to climate change. As a small island state, as a leader of a small island state, I have a clear appeal to all. Sea level rise is a reality and should be considered as a global security threat. It implies that no state should lose any of its rights because of sea level rise. We will continue emphasizing this message as champions of the coalition on addressing sea level rise and existential threats. Through our Island for Islands initiative, we will continue supporting SIDS, and we will continue our leadership position in promoting the nexus between climate change and health. We are extremely satisfied to see many parties joining this important initiative. It always seems impossible until it's done, had stated Nelson Mandela. And there is no better time than today for such an important statement. Let's join forces and enable humanity to reverse this existential threat. On a final note, Madam President, please allow me to also congratulate the United Arab Emirates for celebrating today its National Day. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now Her Excellency Ms. Giorgia Meloni, President of the Council of Ministers of Italy. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Dear colleagues, dear guests, this summit for which I thank the leadership of the United Arab Emirates is a key moment in our efforts to contain global temperature rise to within 1.5 Celsius. We have reached the first global stocktake, and while there are reasons to be optimistic, the goal remains far off. COP28 must be a turning point. We are called upon to set a clear direction and enact concrete actions, reasonable but concrete, such as tripling the world's renewable energy generation capacity by 2030 and doubling the global rate of annual energy efficiency improvements, as also outlined by the Presidency. Italy is doing its part in the decarbonization process, and it does it in a pragmatic way. That means with a technology-neutral approach, free from unnecessary radicalism. My idea is that if we want to be effective, if we want environmental sustainability that does not compromise the economic and social sphere, what we must pursue is an ecological transition and not an ideological one. We are gradually replacing coal-fired power generation with renewables. We have adopted a new energy and climate plan, and we are investing resources and attention on biofuels, so much so that we are among the founders of the Global Biofuels Alliance. In the European context, we have charted a path to carbon neutrality by 2050 and to reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030. But we are also committed to ensuring through the EU Fit for 55 program a multi-sectoral approach that strengthens labor markets and mitigates the impact on our citizens. And this is an essential point, because if we think that the green transition can result in unbearable costs, particularly for the most vulnerable, we condemn it to failure. Italy intends to direct an extremely significant share of the Italian Climate Fund, whose overall endowment is €4 billion, to the African continent. Not, however, through a charitable approach, because Africa does not need charity. It needs to be put in the condition to compete on an equal footing in order to grow and prosper thanks to the multitude of resources that the continent possesses. A cooperation between equals, rejecting paternalistic and predatory approaches. Energy is one of the cornerstones of the Mattei Plan for Africa, the cooperation and development plan on which Italy is working with great determination to build mutually beneficial partnerships and support the energy security of Africa and Mediterranean nations. And we are also, in this way, working towards becoming a strategic hub for clean energy by developing the necessary infrastructure and generation capacity in our homeland and in the Mediterranean. After the Rome Conference on Development and Migration, 2 new financial instruments were established to address the root causes of migration, combat human traffickers, guarantee the right not to emigrate. And we will continue to support the Green Climate Fund also in the next cycle. And as I have already announced it yesterday, we will contribute with €100 million to the new Loss and Damage Fund, strongly pursued by the Emirates presidency. And all these priorities will also be at the heart of Italy's G7 presidency in 2024. I want to thank, in conclusion, the Emirati Chair, Sultan Al Jaber, and express my congratulations for a COP28 of absolute success. We're all aware, colleagues, that many of the efforts that we are making today will likely produce visible results when many of us no longer have roles of responsibility. But doing it anyway, not for ourselves, but for those who come after us, defines the value of our leadership. As Warren Buffett wrote, there is someone sitting in the shade today because someone else planted a tree long ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Hussein Al-Arnous, Prime Minister of Syrian Arab Republic. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of delegation, Mr. President, I would like to extend heartfelt thanks and congratulations to the UAE for the excellent organization of this COP28 and for the warm hospitality. I would also like to thank the Secretariat of the UNFCCC for efforts expended in organizing this important conference. Syria has engaged seriously in global efforts to address, mitigate, and adapt to climate change. It is time to work seriously to advance climate action and to accelerate emissions reduction through energy transition. and also through using land sustainably and in an integrated manner. It is time to transition to sustainable food systems and to operationalize systems to limit loss and damage and to fulfill obligations. Financing is the cornerstone of climate change, as mitigation, adaptation, addressing and limiting loss and damage, climate change all need adequate finance. Distinguished guests, Syria suffers from the impact of climate change. This is evident in the declining rainfall and the rise in dust storms and heat waves, which aggravated desertification, disrupted rainfall distribution, and triggered flash floods and heat waves. The consequences of the terrorist war against the environment in Syria aggravates these effects, and this includes increasing air pollution as a result of terrorist activities and taking control of oil wells. Oil is burned and refined in makeshift facilities in the areas under the control of the U.S. occupation, northeast Syria. Also, oil leaks into the surrounding environment, which leads to pollution in soil surface and underwater population. Also, vast areas of forests are burned. Furthermore, the amount of water flowing from the Euphrates River is on the decline because the upstream country violates its international obligations and does not allow the flow of agreed-upon quantities under international conventions, let alone what the Israeli occupation does in the occupied Syrian Golan, as it uproots trees, dumps dangerous waste, which causes environmental degradation. And this is a clear breach of international law. These adverse impacts are compounded because of the UCMs imposed on the Syrian people. Lack of energy carriers force some people to cut trees to get heating. Also, this is aggravated due to the suspension of a number of internationally funded projects aimed towards environmental protection and addressing climate change. The Syrian Arab Republic, despite of what I mentioned earlier, has followed on environmental protection measures, and we have included the environmental dimension in development and reconstruction plans. We committed ourselves, and we are still committed to international conventions that we signed in the fields of environment and climate change. The NDC's document has been approved and updated. We also approved the National Program for Climate Change in Syria, along with adaptation plans. We have also established a fund to address the effects of droughts and natural disasters, along with a national strategy on transition into renewables. I wish this important conference success in its works. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency, Mr. Gaston Brown, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm before you not only as the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, but as a voice for small island states suffocating under the weight of a crisis we did not create. Our beautiful islands, once paradises on earth, now stand on the front lines of climate change, a war where we are the greatest casualties, although we are the least contributors to the conflict. We are facing an existential paradox. The smallest contributors to global CO2 emissions, yet among the hardest hit by climate catastrophes. This is not just an environmental crisis. It is a glaring testament to a world where profits are prioritized over people and planet. It is a world where oil and gas conglomerates, shielded by the power of wealthy nations, continue to reap astronomical profits, while the survival of nations like ours hangs in the balance. The irony is as bitter as it is unjust. The global community made promises in Paris. Yet the pace of change is lethargically slow and dangerously incremental. We must confront this reality. If we breach the 1.5 degrees threshold, the consequences will be catastrophic, not just for small island states, but for the entire planet. The weapons of mass destruction of our time are not explosive devices, but rising temperatures, scorching droughts, and relentless sea level rise, all consequences of unchecked avarice and apathy. Our proposal for a carbon tax, backed by nations like France and Kenya, is not just a call for action, it is a plea for justice. We stand in firm support for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. It is time to curb the reckless exploitation of fossil fuels. Let me be clear. The path we choose today will determine the fate of generations to come. We call for bold, immediate actions, a relentless pursuit of the 1.5 degrees goal, substantial funding for loss and damage, and transformative financing that respects our vulnerability. We must act with the urgency this crisis demands, and we must act now. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Philip Davis, Prime Minister of Bahamas. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
I first wish to offer my thanks to the President and people of Dubai for the warm welcome and gracious hospitality you have bestowed upon us. My congratulations also to the people of the United Arab Emirates on the celebration of today, your National Day. We wish you peace and prosperity. Your Excellencies, time has run out. Thankfully, mercifully, the record-high temperatures experienced earlier this year in the Bahamas did not translate into a catastrophic hurricane season. We were lucky. But tropical storms and depressions did hit us. They caused high levels of rain, extreme winds, widespread flooding, interrupted our power supply, and resulted in significant costs and loss of revenue. Over the coming 6 months, before the next hurricane season begins, we can use the time to strengthen our National Youth Guard. We can build more homes out of the groundbreaking, carbon-negative, ocean-resistant concrete pioneered by a Bahamian company, Patana, headed by entrepreneur Rick Fox. We can also raise more finance using our blue carbon credits, backed by our extensive underwater fields of seagrasses, which absorb more carbon than the Amazon rainforest. We welcome the pledges made in the past 2 days at this COP to the Loss and Damage Fund. Surely, this puts beyond doubt the debate that the principle has now been settled: the polluter pays. But it has taken 30 years to agree that there should be a fund for loss and damage. And in 13 years, we have not yet hit the original pledge goal of $100 billion per year. So how long must we now wait to have this new fund capitalized? And how long must we wait before we can access the funds? Time is a luxury we do not have. And so we're left wondering how we should interpret the pledges of this COP. So little pledged, given what is needed. So late in the day, given what is forecast. Is the effort here more to reduce the noise pollution generated by our advocacy, rather than to address the carbon reduction and climate financing so urgently needed? Are we expected to remain quietly grateful? Frankly, we do not understand why everyone does not share our sense of urgency. Doing what is needed to help us also helps you. Will you not act urgently to save yourselves? His Holiness Pope Francis recently exhorted those of us who are leaders to demonstrate the nobility of politics and not its shame. But our truths remain inconvenient and, to my mind, shameful. We still live in a world where financing always seems immediately available for the bullets and the bombs. This is a choice. We still live in a world where narrow economic interests continue to drive an increase in the burning of fossil fuels. This is also a choice. But we have no choice. Our plight is not seen in the images of women and children bleeding in the streets. Our plight is mostly invisible. The slowly warming seawater, slowly rising up through our porous limestone islands. The slowly dying coral, no longer able to support the slowly dying fish. By the time our plight is made visible for all to see, our luck will have run out. It will be too late. The storm will have passed. We can only pray that there is something left to see. Friends, we simply want to live.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Dalton Emani Makamau Tagelagi, Prime Minister of NU. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, Alafalahiatu Excellencies, distinguished guests and delegates, all protocols observed. To the President of COP28, let us stand in truth and in solidarity as we portray the common issues on climate change across our islands, territories, and continents. We will remain strong to fight and keep the 1.5 degrees alive. It's a defining moment for this COP28 to deliver what was promised, an allocation of $100 billion annually. Time is up. An urgent action is now needed to deliver climate finance for loss and damage, adaptation and mitigation. Niue is a net sink. It has no responsibility for the causes of climate change. Niue is at high risk of tropical cyclones this season and of drought. 19 years ago, we experienced Category 5 deadly storm. My people are living in fear of another catastrophic cyclone. Residents at low-lying coastal areas have slowly moved to higher ground to avoid detrimental impacts from damaging heavy swells. We are not quite adept as yet. We need resources, financials, and tools to ensure early warning, disaster preparedness, and climate resilience for Niue. We called on to expedite now access and release of climate finance. The delivery mechanism must be flexible, and the mortalities reflect the vulnerability of our islands. I applaud those who have made pledges here at this COP. Pledges must materialize today, not tomorrow. Niue has been very brave and innovative, as we have created our very own sustainable financing mechanism, our first public-private trust, the Niue Oceanwide Trust, and a world-first innovative financing instrument called an Ocean Conservation Commitment. This recognizes the value of our ocean space under a strict protection, and as a global contribution to planet stability, as well as the means to build resilience and the sustainable blue economy for our people. Our OCC represents the partnership between us and offers the willing to co-sponsor a 1 square kilometre of ocean in our large-scale marine protected area for a period of 20 years. This will help us mobilize sufficient predictable resources to invest in a sustainable way to achieve outcomes in climate action, biodiversity protection, SDGs, and security at the same time. At the same time, we'll deliver invaluable climate outcomes for our region and the rest of the world. This is an example of a non-market mechanism under Article 6.8, which we invite others, in particular developed countries, to step up and support so we can actually secure the necessary climate finance we so desperately need and deliver this in a way that will make lasting gains for our people, the region, and the world. Niue contributions hold immense global significance in terms of supporting the long-term stability of our planet and its oceans. Without adequate mitigation, we will not be able to adapt. The global stocktake ensures our survival and our emissions pathways and targets for the future. Our national strategic plan is all about sustainable future that needs economic and social needs while preserving the environment, social stability, and of course, our Niuean culture. Embrace the climate traditional knowledge, practices that have supported climate adaptation. We need to support. I'm going to ask for your support of all countries and individuals represented here at COP28 to unite in solidarity with the people of Niue in our efforts to address the impacts of climate change and to safeguard a more stable future for Niue and the Pacific Blue Continent. Together, we can create a more profound understanding and foster a collective action towards climate resilience. Madam President, may I join the others in wishing His Highness and the people of the United Arab Emirates all the very best for their National Day today, and of course, they're being a great host to us all. And thank you, and God bless us all.
Thank you, Your Excellency. A kind reminder for the speakers to hold their speech within 3 minutes. And now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. José Ulisses de Pina Correia e Silva, Prime Minister of Cabo Verde. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Senhora Presidente, Excelências,
Madam President, Excellencies, I warmly greet Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber, President of the COP28, and I wish him every success.
Cabo Verde tem a firme convicção.
Cabo Verde believes in the scientific evidence, and it has the firm conviction that it is still possible to prevent the planet from warming, to protect it, and to ensure that the temperature does not rise by more than 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. But all of this is going to require great determination. And so it is a political obligation for all countries, for all leaders, to make a top priority out of jointly implementing the solutions and the commitments that we have signed up to. And here, time is the critical factor, because nature continues on its course, reacting to the conditions that human beings create with their actions and their omissions. Cabo Verde is one of the small island developing states. It's located in an arid region of the Sahel. It has very fragile ecosystems, and it is therefore one of the countries most exposed to the risks and the consequences of extreme weather events. As a small island developing state, we encourage there to be a clear and urgent definition of the financing mechanism for loss and damage. We reaffirm also the urgent need to adopt the multidimensional vulnerability index as part of the climate finance criteria for the SIDS. We endorse the declarations of AOSIS and the African Negotiators Group. For Cabo Verde, the climate agenda is one of our top priorities. And for our country, reducing dependence on fossil fuels and increasing our energy efficiency is an economic, environmental, climate, and social imperative, because it has an impact on the balance of payments and on reducing the economic and financial risks in the face of external shocks, reducing carbon emissions and reducing also the energy bills for our companies and our households. We can achieve our objectives and targets for climate action by taking the following actions. First, define and implement integrated long-term strategies and policies. We need a robust legal and institutional framework for climate governance. We need climate finance and transparency mechanisms that involve the public sector, the private sector, and also development partnerships. And we need to improve climate literacy and engage our local communities. With public and private investments in the energy transition, energy efficiency, water efficiency, and the blue economy, we can create opportunities for professional skills, for decent jobs, and for entrepreneurship among our young people. And these are the kind of virtuous effects that we seek, combining a reduction of emissions with an increase in resilience, sustainability, and the creation of economic opportunities. Together with Portugal, we have signed an agreement on the transformation of bilateral debt into climate finance. We have shown that if there is political will and if there is trust between the parties, we can move forward with structured solutions. Transforming debt into climate finance frees up resources for investment. And this has a virtuous impact for sustainable development and for resilience. Now, let me conclude by hoping that this COP28 will produce significant progress in the commitments and in strengthening the capacity to respond to urgent global climate challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Leo Varadkar, Prime Minister of Ireland. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. A Harja mar Kinera tá ragart down Erangludy. Ní raibh lehéid riamh go bhfuil imrí uring ó sard. Tá uran ardú an dúchláin. Credim is féidirling. Excellencies, as leaders, there is a profound responsibility on us and on our shoulders. Never before have the alarm bells been ringing so loudly. We must rise to the challenge, and I believe we can. We cannot prevent climate change. We're well past that point. But by acting urgently now, we can limit its extent and mitigate its worst effects. In mobilizing our societies, we must recognize people's concerns and bring people with us, our farmers, our workers, our enterprises, and our people. With the high cost of living and high energy prices, many worry about how much the transition will cost and what it will mean for their jobs and incomes and living standards. These are legitimate concerns, and we need to hear them. We need to understand where people are coming from and offer reassurance. Change is difficult, but we must do everything in our power to make sure that the transition is just, protecting the vulnerable and leaving nobody behind. And we also need to do a much better job of explaining the benefits of climate action: a livable planet, cleaner air, new jobs and economic opportunities, a more secure world, less conflict over resources, more reliable and more affordable energy, and fewer people on the move from homes that cannot support them anymore. In Ireland, I lead a government that is committed to halving emissions by 2030 and to climate neutrality by 2050. We have a climate law and a carbon budget. We have a new infrastructure, climate and nature fund and a future Ireland fund to help us meet the costs. And this will put billions aside for future investment for future generations. We have a carbon tax which incentivises the shift from fossil fuels with money ring-fenced to ensure a just transition, retrofitting our housing stock, installing EV charging points all over the country, and helping farmers to adopt sustainable practices. And we have a new maritime area regulatory authority to oversee Ireland's renewable energy revolution and harness our vast offshore wind potential, powering millions of homes and businesses across the continent with clean, renewable energy. Ireland is a wealthy country, and even so, we're struggling to make progress, and we're constantly looking at ways to improve. I'm conscious of the even greater challenges that others here face, particularly the least developed and small island developing states. So the Loss and Damage Fund must begin dispersing finance as soon as possible. Ireland will double our climate finance to at least €225 million a year by 2025, and this year we will invest close to €150 million. And today I'm announcing a contribution of €25 million to the new Loss and Damage Fund for 2024 and 2025. And we will make further contributions thereafter. So, dear friends, let us work together so the world has the financial firepower and the institutions and infrastructure it needs to make the journey that we need to make together. We have to prioritise investment in energy access and low-carbon development for the most vulnerable countries. This COP must also set us on a clear path to a safe and planned reduction of fossil fuels. Excellencies, Secretary-General Guterres has said that the challenge of turning a year of burning heat into a year of burning ambition is with us now. So together, let's rise to that challenge. Thank you very much. Gurmiel Mahagav.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency, Mr. Philippe Joseph Pierre, Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, the world is in an uncharted territory. There is but a narrowing window of opportunity to secure a livable planet for all. With the climate crisis raging around the world, affecting not only small island developing states like St. Lucia and the members of the Caribbean community, CARICOM, but developed countries as well, we are here to join hands together, uniting as a collective to take ambitious action with a sense of urgency to course correct. We are here to ensure that every party answers our call at this COP to put us on a pathway that does not further compromise the futures of not only our particularly vulnerable nations, but all of our nations. The impacts have been devastating to our region. Loss and damage have struck at the core of our economies and our societies. At one extreme, lives and livelihoods have been lost. At the other extreme, our environment is under siege. We welcome the decision to at last make the loss and damage fund functional and look forward to the pledges to make it a reality. We thank the UAE and Germany for taking the first step and look forward to other states joining. Madam President, it is a fact that the international financial environment is ill-suited to support vulnerable countries' access to affordable, sustainable, predictable, and scalable finance. To address these financial challenges, CARICOM states, including St. Lucia, are pursuing readiness projects to better access finance. We are also pursuing innovative financial initiatives from conservation bonds to disaster clauses and exploring new opportunities in carbon markets. We are pushing for a reform agenda for international financial institutions through the Bridgestone Initiative and other new economic measurements that will include our vulnerability, like the CDB's Recovery Duration Adjustment, the RDA. Mr. President, Madam President, we are nearing the 1.5 degrees centigrade warning threshold, and we must put people first before economic ratios and statistics. We must leave Dubai assured of three key messages. We leaders must commit to 1, pursuing 1.5 degrees centigrade pathways for just, equitable, and accelerated transition. 2, accelerate progress in implementation of the global goal on adaptation. Deliver transformative finance for a 1.5 degrees centigrade agenda. The time is now for world leaders to transform our world to a safer place for our children. And in this battle, Taiwan must not be left behind. Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It's my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency, Mr. Petteri Orpo, Prime Minister of Finland. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the United Arab Emirates for hosting this event. We need multilateralism now more than ever to take effective action against climate change and to ensure food and energy security. The science is clear. We are not on the track to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees. Global warming has already reached 1.2 degrees, causing widespread damage on all continents. Ongoing wars and violence in different parts of the world are only aggravating the impacts. COP28 marks the culmination of the first ever global stocktake. It is up to us now to act with urgency and determination and make clear political commitments to put us on track. Finland remains committed to supporting developing countries in their climate action. I would like to congratulate the esteemed host of this conference for the landmark agreement on the new fund to respond to loss and damage, and your generous pledge. It is crucial to expand the donor base for climate funding to include more countries on a voluntary basis. Finland stands ready to support the new fund with 3 million euros. We underline the continued importance of other funding mechanisms, including those supporting early warning systems. We must also ensure that all financial flows are in line with the Paris Agreement and need to mobilize more private funding. In this, the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action continues to play a key role. To put us on the right track to reach the Paris goals, the most crucial thing is a rapid clean energy transition away from fossil fuels. A just transition can help create new businesses and jobs and better opportunities for people everywhere. To enable the transition, we should agree global targets for renewables and energy efficiency. These targets need to be accompanied by concrete steps towards phasing out fossil fuels and subsidies that support their use and recognizing the role of the carbon-free technologies like nuclear. Governments must work together within the multilateral system, but we also need broad collaboration with civil society and private sector. In Finland, we have set the ambitious goal to be carbon neutral by 2035 and carbon negative soon after that. This goal can be only reached with strong public-private cooperation. Finnish companies can also offer a variety of practical solutions to help reach carbon neutrality globally. We want our companies to expand their carbon handprint, meaning the positive climate impact that their products can have, and stand ready to share our expertise globally. My government is also committed to ensuring the preservation of natural capital as part of responsible economic policy, and we will work to halt the loss of biodiversity. Our aim is that others around the world can utilize our expertise related to positive nature handprints in addition to carbon footprints. Mr. President, we must show the world that we stand behind the commitments we made in Paris. Let's make sure this COP succeeds in getting us back to track for 1.5 degrees. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Terence Drew, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President of COP28, let me first thank the UAE for its very hospitable welcome to all of us to this most important gathering. If now is not the time for bold action in addressing this planetary crisis, when the world is on fire, is being submerged, is barreling toward 2.7 degrees Celsius, when each day reveals grimmer death tolls attributed to climate, then when is? Are we prepared to accept this as our new norm? Our countries and our vulnerable communities cannot survive another round of inaction, nor should we accept this complacency. For SIDS, 1.5 to stay alive is still a must. Boldly, I joined the bastion of leaders from the Global South, in particular the Caribbean community, forced to the front lines of the climate crisis to demand greater accountability and responsibility. Our countries will be lost to the pages of history if nothing is done. Commendably, however, the Bridgetown initiative of my sister, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, will expedite equitable access, growth, and crisis response. And to the COP28 presidency, we welcome the capitalization of the Loss and Damage Fund. Our host country, the UAE, as it celebrates its 52nd Union Day, and we extend our heartfelt congratulations, is the clearest example of what it means to envision and deliver a resilient development. Action builds trust. This is necessary as we seek to narrow the widening gap between the G7 and the G77. I recall, moderator, the situation of the Republic of China Taiwan, a reliable global partner in the climate crisis. St. Kitts and Nevis firmly believes that Taiwan as an island nation should be allowed to play a meaningful role in the existential policy drives of the United Nations. Moderator, with 50,000 plus people, our small size and notable position as the smallest independent nation in the Western Hemisphere, presents opportunity. With the convergence of our geostrategic outlook, global collaboration, and focused investments, especially in our energy sector, we can become the first model sustainable island state to be found anywhere in the world, showcasing the path to progress and prosperity. Moderator, geothermal development in our Twin Island Federation allows for nationwide underground electric grid connection between our two islands. An investment of US $350 million over the next 5 years can ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis goes fully green with the capacity to provide clean energy to our neighboring countries. Recently, we renegotiated 40 megawatts of solar energy with battery storage capacity, which will ensure that there are redundancies built into our energy grid. We are acting, moderator. Yes, Madam Moderator, our small nation has a GDP of just about 1 billion. While comparatively there are individual nations here that represent the combined GDP of every Caribbean island. However, our size does not dim our ambition. In fact, it stirs especially our choices, our pathway as our choices diminishes. And to wrap up, the transformation to a sustainable island state is so profound as it is linked to our survival, the survival of what it truly means to be Kittitian and Nevisian. And finally, I say, moderator, let us all act to save ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency, Mr. Patrice Emery Torovaada, Prime Minister of São Tomé and Príncipe. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Altezas Reais, chefes de Estados e de Governo,
Your Royal Highnesses, Heads of Government,
senhores, meus senhores,
Delegates, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
é uma honra para mim estar aqui hoje. É inspirador.
It is an honor for me to be here today.
Comum e urgente.
It's very inspiring to see such great minds in one room fighting for one cause, combating climate change. As we gather here, I would like to express my thanks and the thanks of my delegation to the government of the UAE for your warm hospitality and your laudable efforts to organize this significant event. I would also like to avail myself of this opportunity to commend Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, our president of this COP, and wish him every success during his mandate. Our world is at a historic crossroads. Climate change is redefining our landscape, our agriculture, giving rise to hunger, wars, giving rise to migration, threatening vital ecosystems and jeopardizing whole communities. Every drought, every fire, every rise of the sea levels reminds us urgently that we absolutely need to provide a global response, which sadly, unfortunately, has just remained on paper so far. We hear about these billions of dollars that are promised but are never received, and this does not work for countries such as mine. We prefer to continue to define our needs to reform our multilateral financial institutions, to give access to financial products and means that are more accessible and in greater quantity. We need more realistic, more and less ideological macroeconomic stabilization programs. We prefer to rely on the liberating force of creativity and technological innovation, and to rely on AI, and to combat and to fight so that all of these things do not give rise to exclusion and domination. We rely on our own efforts, on our own sacrifices, first of all. We are here representing nations, communities, and various viewpoints, mindsets, but our main mission, let us not forget, is a unique mission, namely to provide sustainable solutions and collaborative actions for the well-being of our planet. The decisions, the commitments we undertake here have a huge weight, not only for our generations, but for future future generations and future life on Earth. As we engage in these fundamental discussions, we must be committed, all of us together, to principles of sincerity, solidarity, transparency, and inclusiveness. Our dialogues need to be guided by science, by scientific data, and what we do must be spurred by this sense of emergency, and by our resolutions need to reflect this collective determination to create a better world which is more resilient and sustainable. My country, because of where it is located, it's a small island, it's an archipelago. We have a small population, and our territory is fragmented. It is islands, and as a result of this, there are restrictions which make it impossible for us to adopt scalable solutions, and we have to strive very hard to establish connectivity. This being said, we face our responsibilities. We are committed to the ambitious goals and to raising huge investment for renewable energy so that we can protect our forests and our oceans. The tireless dedication of Sao Tome and Principe as a leader to combat climate change and to strengthen climate financing includes the conservation of mangroves and special reservations in Sao Tome, just beyond the island of Principe, which is already a World Biosphere reservation. Ladies and gentlemen, today, once again, in this COP28 in Dubai, we reaffirm our commitment to meet the aims we established in our previously agreed agreements. We recognize that this transition towards a low-carbon economy is not only a moral obligation, but it is also an opportunity to bring about sustainable growth, to create green jobs, blue jobs, and to improve living standards and quality for all. We are committed to a paradigm shift wherein sustainability and development walk hand in hand.
Your Excellency, it is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Alexander De Croo, Prime Minister of Belgium. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have all come together here in Dubai at a crucial moment. For me, for Belgium, and for many people I've spoken to in the recent weeks, this COP is the most important one since Paris. Because it's high time to turn our words and promises into action. It is time to talk about solutions instead of problems. It is time to talk about hope instead of fear. In order to attain our goals, we need everyone on board. Governments, and even more so, our people and the private sector. Science tells us that unless there are immediate, rapid, and large-scale reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius will be beyond reach. Even those who don't believe in science can no longer close their eyes. The climate emergency is upon us. It affects and reverberates across the world. Every country needs to do its share. Within the EU, ambitious targets have been set for each country. There is no shortage of arguments today. There are plenty calls to action. Voices of our population, scientists, activists, court verdicts. All this comes down to one thing. It should motivate us to accelerate our efforts and to put all energy we have in realizing our commitments. There are many reasons to be hopeful. It's a fact. A record-breaking 340 billion euro have been invested in renewable energy globally this year. It's a fact. We finally made good on our pledge to mobilize $100 billion in climate finance. It's a fact that many climate analysts believe that carbon emissions will peak in the coming years. It's a fact. More and more people are on board when it comes to accelerate our actions. Young and old, with ideals and ideas, academics and entrepreneurs, whose discoveries and technologies provide concrete and sometimes very simple answers to the challenges of recycling, water decontamination, and greenhouse gas capture. My message to you is that the climate issue belongs neither to the deniers nor to the alarmists. It belongs to those who get up early, to those who grab every opportunity to contribute in speeding up the transition. If we want peak emissions now to reduce global emissions by 30% by 2030, we need ecology and economy. Too often, they have been opposed one against the other, while in fact, they are reinforcing each other. We will not build a climate paradise on an industrial wasteland. In our run to net zero future by 2050, we need clean tech, green chemistry, green steel production, and green construction sites. The good news is that we are already building that future. Our North Sea wind turbines will produce enough green offshore electricity by 2030 to cover the equivalent of the electricity consumption of 5 million households. In Ghent, 1 billion will be invested to produce the most durable steel in the world. And from Liège, we are revolutionizing the hydrogen industry with cutting-edge technology. What we need now is a conducive environment to accelerate progress globally, phasing out fossil fuels. And in this regard, Belgium ended direct public finance for unabated fossil fuels and shifted resources towards renewables, which will be needed in order to triple renewable energy and double energy efficiency. We will only reach these goals when innovations and good practices will be accessible to everyone, to all SMEs, to all households in every corner of the world. In Europe, we need to create the right incentives to support our economy in realizing this ambition. As the incoming President of the European Union, this will be my priority. Europe will obviously not win the climate race alone. Partnerships are crucial, especially with Africa, which harnesses 40% of the global solar energy potential, and as stated by the President of Kenya at the African Climate Summit, has the potential to become the green engine of the world. Belgium has already partnered up with countries such as Namibia, Morocco, and Egypt to accelerate this green revolution in wind, in solar, in hydrogen. We have increased our climate finance to approximately 150 million euros, focusing our effort on biodiversity and sustainable development. In the Sahel region, we are implementing a 5-year, 50 million euros program supporting the Great Green Wall Initiative. We have launched innovative instruments such as Debt for Climate Swap. In Mozambique, such instruments will facilitate the implementation of the National Loss and Damage Strategy. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are only going to get this under control if we work together. And if our citizens engage in creating a more prosperous, a more inclusive, and a healthier society. The most important result of COP28 that I would hope for is to create this dynamic of action and trust. Trust that we will be able to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. But for that, we need to scale up the solutions that are in front of our eyes and that we already have in our hands. Tripling renewables, doubling energy efficiency. It should be done, and it can be done. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Trinh Pham Minh, Prime Minister of Vietnam. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, I'd like to extend my congratulations on the National Day of UAE and for its excellent arrangements towards the success of COP28. Distinguished delegates, the global climate system is approaching its red line. In the hottest year in modern history, icebergs are melting faster than ever. Rising sea levels, droughts, floods, landslides In many countries, erosions and forest fires as well are becoming more devastating. Many territories and communities are at risk of being swallowed up by the sea. Energy and food security is threatened, and development achievements are at risk of being undone. In addition, aging populations and resource depletion are adding to the ever-increasing challenges facing the world today. The gap between climate commitments and actions remains wide. Competition, division, fragmentation, wars, conflicts, and diseases are further dispersing much necessary resources for climate action. After 14 years, we still have not managed to fulfill the commitment of mobilizing $100 billion per year to combat climate change. Thus, we need to walk the talk, to make good on our promises. Such is the key to bolster trust among countries and address bottlenecks in the negotiations on climate change adaptation. The impact of climate change and diseases in recent years has further proven that these are global and whole of population issues. Thus, we too need to adopt a new mindset, methodology, and approach that is more proactive, substantive, and effective, and together pursue global actions in a unified and synchronized manner. Each country needs to take responsibility in best harnessing its internal strength, which is fundamental, strategic, long-term, and decisive. In conjunction with making the most of important external resources and upholding multilateralism, it is necessary to consider the people and the world's common interest as the heart and goals of our endeavors and ensure that no country or citizen is left behind. We should also strive to mobilize diverse resources from public and private sectors and build upon internal, external, bilateral, multilateral, and other lawful resources, particularly resources from the private sector. Developed countries need to provide greater support to developing and least developed countries. This includes preferential capital, transfer of advanced technology, high-quality human resource development, smart governance, and assistance in improving modern and effective market institutions in line with the unique circumstances of each country. At the same time, developing and least developed countries cannot afford to be passive or overly dependent on external help. Instead, they need to make greater efforts in improving their own capacity, pursuing self-reliance and resilience and self-improvement in the spirit of no one can help you better than yourself. However, it is also necessary to ensure fairness and justice in climate action. That means ensuring national energy self-sufficiency and security, and effective access to affordable clean energy for all businesses, people, and countries. Distinguished delegates, Vietnam has been acting in high responsibility since COP26 in Glasgow. When the world continues to witness more challenges than opportunities, Vietnam still strives to uphold its obligation towards the world and its population through the comprehensive implementation of the following efforts. First, developing relevant plans and arranging for their implementation. These include the Climate Change Strategy, the Green Growth Strategy, the Power Development Plan 8, PDP 8, with renewable energy accounting for a greater share in Vietnam's energy mix, development of the renewable energy industry and a renewable energy ecosystem entailing human resources, other resources, planning, and relevant facilities. Second, implementing Vietnam's nationally determined contributions NDC, establishing the Secretariat and launching the Resource Mobilization Plan and the Implementation Plan of the JETP. Adopting and implementing the plan to allocate 1 million hectares for the cultivation of high-quality, low-emission rice, particularly in terms of methane emission. Third, building relevant institutions, including the drafting of the oil and gas law and improvement of the land and electricity laws in ways that enable and support the development of renewable energy. Vietnam is also developing and finalizing the decree on direct power purchase so as to address renewable energy projects and outstanding issues facing the people
people and businesses in the energy transition process. Distinguished delegates, time waits for no one. Challenges are becoming more and more complex and unpredictable. Therefore, let us uphold greater unity. Let us put in greater efforts. Let us work together more effectively for the development and prosperity of mankind, the health of this planet, of our beloved planet, and the happiness and prosperity of all people around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Ulf Kristersson, Prime Minister of Sweden. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Excellencies, colleagues. My two key words here today are urgency and opportunity. Urgency and opportunity. Urgency based on science and numerous alarming IPCC reports. Opportunity based on the new jobs and growth that the green transition brings. Sweden is an inspiring example of this, if I may say so. Since 1990, our emissions have been cut by more than 37%. At the same time, our economy has doubled. This is due to a few factors. One, an energy mix almost free from fossil fuels, with nuclear energy, hydro, and wind as important pillars. But also an early and high tax on carbon dioxide. And innovative Swedish businesses. Swedish emissions per capita are now the lowest in the European Union, together with Portugal. The transition is exponential in sectors as steel, transport, and heavy industry. The steel industry alone accounts for some 8% of global emissions. In 2021, Swedish industry produced the first fossil-free steel ready for delivery. And 3 of the world's leading climate tech companies are now Swedish, all present here, of course, at COP28. The green transition is not only necessary to save the planet, it is also vital for our own competitiveness. Reaching net zero by mid-century requires a rapid and complete phase-out of fossil fuels in electricity and, of course, in heat production. To succeed, it is crucial to increase production in all fossil-free sources, nuclear power included. Sweden is now taking concrete steps towards new nuclear capacity, and I'm happy to stand side by side with like-minded countries here at COP28 and in the European Union. Let me also stress the importance of what is taking place at the European Union level, as we are laying the ground for a green revolution with the climate package Fit for 55. The EU has not only put in place ambitious targets for 2030, we have also decided on binding legislation that will reduce emissions by 57%. This will define and incentivize national action across our 27 member states. It means that 450 million Europeans will adapt to a green transition. An enhanced and expanded emission trading system will put a cap on nearly all carbon emissions within the Union. The EU can now show the rest of the world how policies to reduce emissions can be combined with increased growth and increased welfare. Climate action requires global solutions. We might have different timelines and pathways to net zero, but our common goals are clearly defined in the Paris Agreement. Limit temperature increases to 1.5 degrees, build more resilient societies, and transform financial flows in support of those goals. Here, at COP28, we need to agree on an ambitious outcome of the global stocktake and the phase-out of fossil fuels. we need to send a strong call to all parties, G20 countries in particular, to come forward with new NDCs ahead of COP30 that are economy-wide, cover all gases, and cut emissions faster in line with 1.5 degrees. We look forward to adopting the new framework for the global goal on adaptation. We will stand with the most vulnerable to operationalize the funding arrangements and the fund for responding to loss and damage. And we want to establish a space to accelerate the transition of financial flows. To the UAE presidency, thanks a lot for hosting us. To all parties, let COP28 be the COP where we unite, where we act, and where we deliver. To all civil society actors and businesses, we look forward to hearing your voices, inspiring us to do more, faster, and together. Let us embrace the urgency of climate action, but also all the opportunities. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now it is my great honor to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Edi Rama, Prime Minister of Albania, my lovely country.
I know that everyone is waiting to speak. I'm not sure anyone is eager to listen. But I have to tick my box, so sorry, bear with me for a few minutes. As a representative of the Republic of Albania, but also of a fast yet developing region in Europe, named the Western Balkans, I stand before you today to share a few thoughts. We all know that for decades, developing nations like ours have strived tirelessly to address the challenges of development while grappling with the adverse impacts of climate change. And yes, the Paris Agreement was a beacon of hope, a promise made by the world to safeguard our planet and its inhabitants. But however, the reality falls short of the commitments made. And to say it all, the burden of climate action continues to disproportionately fall on the shoulders of developing nations, despite our minimal contribution to the crisis, while the big polluters do their best to lecture us, but not to stop themselves. Anyhow, what we do is what we believe in, and we have committed to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions with 20.9% by 2030 and then achieve climate neutrality by 2050. Secondly, our country aims to become an energy leader in the region and a net exporter of energy by 2030. But you should know that Albania is one of the rarest countries that has no CO2 emissions from energy production. Of course, on the other hand, it is under an extreme high hydrological risk because we are dependent on climate, and so we are now in a full-scale diversification with solar and wind. Thirdly, Albania has progressed by implementing nature-based solution practices in the recent year, and this year Vjosa, the so-baptized last wild river of Europe, has been declared a national park in Albania. It was fun, though, because the bigger and the richer around us in Europe that have tamed all their rivers lectured us big time how important it is to have a wild river in Europe. Doesn't matter, fun is good, and our commitment is strong and real, so We did it, and we are fully dedicated to continue so. At the end, let me conclude with a special mention and thank wholeheartedly the gracious host country of this big event, UAE, and the leadership of this country, the visionary president, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, who is showing to our community of countries what does it mean to connect words with deeds. And by saying goodbye to all of you, I wish we had more UAEs in our community of countries as to make the dark lighter and our journey brighter. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Anwar-ul-Haq Kakar, Prime Minister of Pakistan. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
His Royal Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, distinguished Head of State and Government, Your Excellency Dr. Al Jabbar, President of COP28, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Our profound appreciation and gratitude to His Royal Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan for his visionary leadership and for hosting COP28, including the World Climate Action Summit. Excellencies, climate change is an existential threat for humankind. What science has forecast is happening. Last year, Pakistan suffered superb floods. This year will be the world's hottest year in recorded history. The global stocktake is another grim wake-up call. This must be a COP of action. Excellencies, at COP26 in Glasgow, we increased our ambition, presenting our revised nationally determined contributions with the target of 50% overall reduction in projected emissions by 2030. This year, Pakistan presented a comprehensive national adaptation plan and has also launched an innovative Living Indus initiative that brings together our care for climate and for nature. And we will be presenting our first biennial update report during this COP. Last year, we led the endeavor to craft an agreement on establishing a global loss and damage fund. This year, we worked to activate an adequately financed loss and damage fund and its funding arrangements. It is critical that under UAE's leadership, COP28 also activates the means of implementation, that is climate finance, technology transfer, and capacity building for developing countries, based on the established principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. Climate justice demands that the developing countries be enabled to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals even as they contribute to climate objectives. The provision of sufficient, additional, predictable, grant-based climate finance by developed countries is imperative. The $100 billion commitment for climate finance must be fulfilled. And such finance should not be at the cost of development finance, nor add to the already high debt burden of the developing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope the successful conclusion of the global stocktake will also provide a recipe for a global course correction, especially by keeping the 1.5 Celsius degree temperature goal within reach. Developed countries must take the lead in raising global mitigation ambition, commensurate with their economic standing and historical responsibility, and then help developing countries do the same. Finally, we need to achieve global resilience through delivering an ambitious outcome in the form of a framework for the global goal on adaptation, with clear targets and indicators, including regular monitoring of progress. At least half of climate finance must be allocated to adaptation. Excellencies, our expectations from COP28 are high, but not unrealistic. Let this COP deliver with actions, not just words. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Najib Mikati, Prime Minister of Lebanon. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
حضرت دولة رئيس الإمارات العربية المتحدة سعادة الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة الحضور الكريم. بداية الشكر الكبير لدولة الإمارات العربية الشقيقة.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like at the outset to thank the UAE for hosting this conference and for the efforts made over these last months to work towards the goals that we set in Paris in 2015 and at the subsequent COPs. Today, as a representative of Lebanon, I call on all of us to tackle the urgent need to bolster national resilience, in particular in the parts of the world where the challenges posed by climate change are converging with the challenges of war. Lebanon is facing the Israeli aggression, which is affecting people and goods and is having an intensified impact on the climate question too, in a situation where we are facing the serious environmental deterioration, which is one of the effects of the Israeli aggression underway, the continued use of indiscriminate weapons such as white phosphorus weapons are violations which have caused civilian deaths and which are causing irreparable damage of more than 5,000 square meters of agricultural land and forests, which are destroying the livelihoods and revenue sources for our people and are causing a displacement of tens of thousands of Lebanese people. And it is therefore imperative to recognize the disastrous consequences of war and attacks on the environment. It's also urgent to respond within the framework of international law and international humanitarian law. The presidency of COP28 has committed to reinforcing capacity to adapt to climate change in the regions that face conflict and crises and displacements and migrations. In this context, the announcement made by His Highness Mohammed Al Nahyan to establish a fund of $30 billion for climate solutions around the world is essential, not just to mitigate the direct impact of the loss and damage, but also to reinforce resilience and to bolster adaptation capacity. It's crucial that we expand the scope of these mechanisms to tackle the growing challenges posed by loss and damage and to also include rebuilding sustainable and green economies, including in Lebanon. Our energy sector has suffered from successive crises, and it is essential, therefore, to revitalize the sector and to ensure that we have the financing needed to undertake the transition to clean energy sources and renewables, and also mitigating the negative impact of climate change. As we discuss the global stocktake and look at what we have done with mitigation and adaptation and financing, I call on all to go beyond our differences and to work for the benefit of all to ensure a better world for future generations. The world is looking to us, hoping for much from us and from the work that we carry out here and the decisions that we take today. So let us therefore work to ensure that this COP28 here at the UAE will produce concrete action, concrete and strong commitment commitment to open the way to a sustainable future for all. In conclusion, I say that we are fully aware of how important it is to live in tolerance, and if we work on this foundation, working with the legacy of those whose names have entered history, we can achieve much. And I would say today that here we have nations that have done much to write history and have left an indelible trace in many areas, including those areas that bring us together today. And this great man who I'm talking about is Sheikh Zayed, and I wish him long life and wish us all to continue in his footsteps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Irakli Garibashvili, Prime Minister of Georgia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Secretary General, Your Excellencies, Presidents and Prime Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a great honor and privilege for me to address you all on behalf of the government and people of Georgia. I would like to express profound gratitude to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the President of the UAE, for generous hospitality and for hosting this important summit in Dubai. The United Arab Emirates is indeed a global role model of technological innovation and modernization, creativity and progress, and it is now championing the climate resilience efforts as well. Dear colleagues, visible impacts of climate change that become increasingly severe and have devastating effects on both people and environment require expedited progress towards climate resilience. It is my strong belief, therefore, that several major international efforts must be maintained to manage the climate crisis worldwide. These include reducing the global emissions by half by 2030 and maintaining the threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius in line with the Paris Agreement, contributing consistently to the Loss and Damage Fund, and adopting a framework to reach the global goal of climate adaptation. The promise of $100 billion a year in climate finance should be kept as well, as must be the commitment towards doubling the climate action finance for adaptation. We take our role in addressing the climate crisis seriously in Georgia and have already taken significant steps towards this end. Over $500 million was allocated for the climate mitigation adaptation measures from the state budget of Georgia this year. Moreover, development of the national infrastructure is already taken into account, the low carbon and climate adaptation measures, equaling to over $300 million a year. My government supports the idea of making Europe the first continent to reach a net zero emissions balance. With this in mind, we have adopted a long-term low emissions development strategy, declaring carbon neutrality as an important goal by 2050. Georgia also commits to presenting a new and more ambitious nationally determined contribution in 2025. In addition, I'm delighted to note that up to 85% of electricity comes from renewable sources in Georgia. However, further enhancement of our share of renewables energy remains a strategic priority for us, and I am pleased to announce that Georgia is joining the COP28 Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge. Dear colleagues, I strongly support the vision of the COP28's presidency for scaling up renewable energy to phase out the unabated fossil fuels. We believe that the formally negotiated outcome should include a commitment to triple renewable energy and double energy efficiency by 2030, along with an equitable phase-out of unabated fossil fuels. In conclusion, I am hopeful that during COP28, we will be able to live up to the unique moment together and deliver on a promise to shape a brighter, healthier, and greener future for the generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Russell Mizo Dlamini, Prime Minister of Eswatini. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, heads of state and government, Secretary General of the UN, the Executive Secretary of UN FCCC, Excellencies and colleagues, distinguished delegates. It is with great honor that I present this statement on behalf of the head of state of the Kingdom of Eswatini, His Majesty King Mswati III, at this August gathering. Mr. President, after nearly 3 decades of commitments to combat climate change, all achieved is an increase in global emissions and temperatures. WMO has confirmed that 2023 is the warmest year on record, and the production gap report indicates that the commitments made remain just words. Fossil fuel usage remains high, much against the national plans. For instance, in Eswatini and the SADC region, trucks are queuing in large numbers at borders and harbors, carrying tons and tons of coal in transit to the developed world. While this continues, the use of nature-based mitigation is being promoted as though nature is responsible for the high atmospheric gas concentrations. With such practices, reaching net zero by 2050 will be impossible, and developing countries should not be made to pay through the use of carbon markets. Mr. President, let us all meet our commitments as deep emission cuts are long overdue. The Secretary General has rightly noted that we are now past global warming and has reached global boiling. Those that have led the way in development and emitting should lead the way in mitigation. Technologies are necessary for attaining net zero and should be transferred to the global south. Resources have to be availed to assist countries adapt to the climate wrath being experienced and ensure that these match the national development agenda, which remain a great priority for developing countries. We further need to close the gap in resource flows to meet the actual need through urgent, predictable, and sufficient financing, as well as ensuring availability of means of implementation. Furthermore, loss and damage is on the increase, with 2023 having seen a high number of weather and climate-related disasters across the globe. We therefore urge for the resourcing of the Loss and Damage Fund so as not to compromise the welfare and livelihoods of our people, as well as infrastructure development. Mr. President, prioritization of the above will ensure full implementation of the NDC commitments and national adaptation plans, of which Eswatini is currently finalizing. Mr. President, furthermore, all countries should be part of the agreements and commitments on climate action, as we are a global community and are commonly bound. If countries like Taiwan have voluntarily committed for the sake of the planet and people without being a party to the negotiations, then the rest of us can and must do more, and we call for Taiwan to be allowed to formally join in future UNFCCC discussions. In conclusion, Mr. President, no one should be left behind in making COP28 count and ensuring that all the green initiatives are sustainable and that are linked to the key pillars for economic development. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to kindly remind to the speakers to hold their statements within 3 minutes. And now, it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Robina Nabanya, Prime Minister of Uganda. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings from His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and the people of Uganda. Uganda congratulates the United Arab Emirates for its exemplary leadership in convening COP28. Uganda is uniquely favored by nature compared to other parts of the globe because it lies across the equator and is between 621 meters and 5,011 meters above sea level. That's why it enjoys the sun, punctuated with plenty of rain all the year round. Uganda also has moderate temperatures of 19 degrees Celsius at night and 24 to 29 degrees Celsius during day. Some parts of Uganda actually have permanent snow, like Mount Rwenzori, which is right next to the equator. Uganda also has a massive plateau with large freshwater bodies, and that's why Uganda is called the Pearl of Africa. While Uganda's natural biodiversity presents important opportunities for adaptation and mitigation that can greatly contribute to the global reduction of greenhouse gas emissions of up to 24.7% by the year 2030, it is highly vulnerable to climatic shocks. Because of recent, in some parts of the country, we have experienced floods, landslides, and prolonged drought with rising temperatures, yet the country contributes only 0.01 of the global emissions. We therefore appeal to partnerships to offset these climate change costs. Uganda is mindful of the rampant degradation and the associated impacts escalating climate change. As a result, the government of Uganda has come up with policies to protect and preserve our environment and biodiversity. Since these provide global benefits in mitigating climate change, we invite partnership and support to protect and conserve these nature-based solutions to climate change. I note that recently, only 10% of the climate finances reach the local level. This is unacceptable. Uganda, therefore, supports the climate finance approaches in which at least 70% of the resources are allocated to locally prioritized climate actions while empowering the last mile communities. Uganda looks forward to COP28 establishing loss and damage fund that is accessible, free from bureaucracy of multilateral development banks, and free from the debt trap. The government of Uganda recognizes and welcomes the Glasgow Climate Pact of the multiple forms and stages of just transitions, and we envision an orderly and phased energy transition that ensures the shift from fossil fuel to renewable energy minimizes negative consequences on workers, communities, ecosystems, and national economies for enhanced energy access and sustainable development. Finally, Your Excellencies, I would like to inform you that Uganda will be hosting the 19th Non-Allied Movement Summit from 15th to 20th January 2024, and thereafter the third South Summit, that is GIS 77 plus China, from 21st to 23rd January 2024 in Kampala, Uganda. On behalf of His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda, allow me to invite you to attend the said meetings. I look forward to receiving you in Uganda, the Pearl of Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Borjana Cristo, Prime Minister of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here today to address key concerns that affect us all, issues impacting our planet and future generations. We find ourselves at a pivotal moment in human history. Climate change is not isolated to specific regions. Rather, it poses a global threat demanding urgent, coordinated, and decisive action. Bosnia and Herzegovina is dedicated to pursuing a sustainable future and actively engages in the crucial discourse on climate changes. Recognizing the gravity of our current situation and the challenges we face, we are prepared to contribute to the global effort to preserve our planet. Our commitment to combat climate change is unwavering. We are dedicated to transitioning to renewable energy sources. With the aim to reduce greenhouse gases and their impact on the natural environment. Shifting to renewable energy sources is not only imperative, but also a unique opportunity to build a more sustainable, economically stable, and ecologically sensitive society in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Through investments in renewable energy technology and investment incentives, Bosnia and Herzegovina aims to partner global efforts to reduce greenhouse gases and mitigate climate change. We wholeheartedly support all global initiatives and endeavors for environmental sustainability and protection. We endorse and adhere to guidelines and recommendations stemming from United Nations initiatives such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. We have established and implemented the Western Balkans Green Agenda concept as a strategy aimed at aligning environmental policies of Western Balkan countries with the European Green Deal and shift to sustainable economy represented by 5 pillars: decarbonization, circular economy, reduction of environmental pollution, sustainable rural communities, protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems through implementing measures outlined in the Sofia Declaration Action Plan. Achieving the Green Agenda objectives requires cooperation, knowledge and technology exchange, and international community support. In this view, we are committed and determined to take responsibility and join global efforts to achieve sustainable future for all. We are committed and determined. We aspire to engage more proactively in global efforts related to climate change, cooperating with other countries and sharing positive experiences and resources towards our common goal. Therefore, Bosnia and Herzegovina, with full responsibility, joins the Emirates Declaration on Resilient Food Systems, Sustainable Agriculture and Climate Actions that marks a significant step towards global partnership, which is key to addressing challenges posed by climate change. As a responsible member of the international community, we recognize the urgent need for joint action to preserve our planet. By joining the Emirates Declaration, we convey a strong message of solidarity and shared responsibility for the preservation of our planet. We invite other countries to join this global effort aiming to collectively build a more sustainable, resilient, and prosperous society for all. On behalf of Bosnia and Herzegovina, I reaffirm our dedication, readiness, and desire for proactive cooperation in the fight against climate change. We believe that only together, as a global community, we can bring about significant efforts and ensure the safety of our planet for our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States of America. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. It is my honor to be with the distinguished leaders who are here today. 2 years ago, President Joe Biden stood on stage at COP26 and made a declaration of ambition. The United States of America will once again be a global leader in the fight against the climate crisis. Since then, the United States has turned ambition into action. President Biden and I have made the largest climate investment in the history of our country, and some have said the world. Roughly $1 trillion over the next 10 years. As a result, today, across the United States, we are building and expanding hundreds of solar panel, wind turbine, electric vehicle, and battery manufacturing plants. We are laying thousands of miles of high-voltage transmission lines to deliver clean energy to every corner of our nation. And we are lowering emissions, not only in energy and transportation, but in industry, agriculture, buildings, and construction. We are also investing in resilience and adaptation to restore our coastlines, wetlands, and forests, and to make communities more resilient to climate-driven extreme weather. We have also placed equity at the center of all of our work, investing in marginalized communities, which are often hardest hit by extreme weather and bear a disproportionate burden from fossil fuel pollution. Globally, the United States is a leader in the effort to expand international climate finance. This year alone, we have increased our contributions to over $9.5 billion, which puts us on track to reach President Biden's ambitious $11 billion goal by 2024. Today, I am also proud to announce a new $3 billion pledge to the Green Climate Fund, which helps developing countries invest in resilience, clean energy, and nature-based solutions. Today, we are demonstrating through action how the world can and must meet this crisis. This is a pivotal moment. Our action collectively, or worse, our inaction, will impact billions of people for decades to come. For as much as we have accomplished, there is still so much more work to do, and continued progress will not be possible without a fight. Around the world, there are those who seek to slow or stop our progress. Leaders who deny climate science, delay climate action, and spread misinformation. Corporations that greenwash climate inaction and lobby for billions of dollars in fossil fuel subsidies. In the face of their resistance, and in the context of this moment, we must do more. In order to keep our critical 1.5 degrees Celsius goal within reach, we must have the ambition to meet this moment, to accelerate our ongoing work, increase our investments, and lead with courage and conviction. Even given the challenges we face, I am optimistic. With ambition and bold action, I know we will build a cleaner, healthier, and more prosperous world for this generation and for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Stephanie Ligamamada Rabuka, Prime Minister of Fiji. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon. May I join with all my colleagues and on behalf of the President of the Republic of Fiji and the people of Fiji, congratulate UAE on your 52nd National Day. Congratulations. And we thank you for your hospitality. We thank you for the reception we have received and everything you have done for us since we arrived here a few days ago. Ladies and gentlemen, 31 years ago, I was Prime Minister of Fiji. We sent a minister to attend the very first Earth Summit held in Rio. A few years after that, those that attended that summit formed themselves, or we formed ourselves, into a conference of parties. And we're here at the 28th Conference of Parties, or COP28. What have we done in 28 years, or 31 years? It seems to us in the Pacific that we have not done enough. We are sinking. The cyclones are getting more severe. Earlier this week, there was a flood in Fiji. Areas that never used to be flooded were flooded. And after that, we recorded temperatures more than 10 degrees more than our average for this time of the year. Since 1992, emissions have dramatically increased at a rate that destines us and the world that we live in to destruction. The rate of emissions is a core metric to take stock and respond to. Climate change in the Pacific is a major threat to our very own existence, our survival, our identity. It is clear that we are at a breaking point for survival of not only the Pacific, but for humanity. And for that very reason, I will continue to champion my call for the Pacific to be a zone or an ocean of peace, which includes our collective responsibility to combat climate change and preserve the environment. The environment is our life in the Pacific. I believe that a transformational response is needed. These include just transition that ensures global emissions peak before 2025. This will require deep cuts to emissions that align with the target of keeping global average temperatures rise to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. From last week's recorded temperatures in Fiji, I do not know whether we're going to achieve that. But I call upon all of us to strive towards that. Otherwise, we'll be under the sea. Otherwise, it'll be too hot to live in the tropics. We must ramp up our adaptation. We must double up on our finances by 2025 and agree on the framework for the global goal on adaptation. I welcome the Presidency's commitment to finalize the adoption of the GGA framework by the end of this COP28. We welcome the progress this week on the work on loss and damage fund. We urge the fund to be more targeted to the special challenges confronting small island developing states,
because we are the most exposed and most vulnerable. It's estimated that $4 trillion will be needed annually by 2030 to manage the impact of climate change. There needs to be a Herculean effort to mobilize financing and investment that is accessible and cost-effective in delivering benefits to all. For us, it is our survival. We call upon every one of us to please cooperate for our survival, for our identity. I do not know which COP will not have any representation from the Pacific. I hope we will continue to have representation from your Pacific friends, brothers and sisters. So let us cooperate and conserve the universe that we live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome now His Excellency Mr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam Chairperson, Your Excellencies, overwhelmingly and correctly, the global community has the settled view that human beings, by their acts of commission and omission, have been causing and are accelerating dangerously a climate change crisis, which portends an enveloping global disaster for life, living, and production. Essentially, human beings are sleepwalking into a disaster of historic proportions. Nothing that has been proposed so far at this conference of parties has risen to the level of urgency and scale of the transformation required or demanded to avert the impending debacle for humanity. The leaders of the countries which are the major emitters of greenhouse gases know it. The profiteering barons, corporate barons globally know it. The informed population of our planet know it. And we in the Caribbean know it quite well because we feel it. So too the world's poorest people who experience daily the consequences of calamitous climate change. They know it very well. Yet we continue to tinker here and there with paltry initiatives and then celebrate them falsely as epoch-making and transformative. We may fool ourselves. We cannot fool nature. Humanity is facing a metaphoric chasm, a sprawling divide between what is required and what is being timidly advanced. We cannot cross this chasm by baby steps. If we seek to do so, we would fall below and beneath the widening gorge. Saving humanity from the disaster of man-made climate change is a great cause. And great causes have never been won by doubtful men and women. We know that the planet cannot much survive beyond global warming in excess of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. On present course, humanity will exceed this target soonest. We know the compelling answers to this existential challenge, but we recoil from embracing them and acting upon them. You're not going to get the details from me here. You know them. Everybody knows them. In any case, in any great cause, the answers or solutions revolve around 4 critical requisites. Nothing is possible without people. Nothing is doable without high-quality strategic leadership. Nothing is achievable without the mobilization of a sufficiency of resources. And nothing is sustainable without specially crafted institutions to deliver the transformative results agreed upon. We have been not involving the Earth's people in an informed and structured manner. The planet's leadership on this existential matter has been, by and large, very uneven and shows currently little sign of improving. The resources which are available among the rich countries and the rich people of our planet have not been mobilized in any sufficiency for the tasks at hand. And the global institutions to address the haunting bundle of sustainable issues are in a ramshackle condition, and there is currently very little likelihood of their efficacious reform to make them fit for purpose. Unless we address collectively and in solidarity each of these considerations optimally, humanity as we know it is doomed. This is not the usual end of times doomsday scenario of inevitability grounded in religious prophecy. In this great cause, it is necessary and desirable to apply the Aristotelian proposition: equity among equals, proportionality among unequals. The rich and powerful countries have a huge obligation to right the historic and current wrongs. We, the metaphoric unwashed multitudes, must in solidarity insist on that, and at the same time do our part responsibly and urgently. Justice and solidarity are thus to be combined. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Distinguished heads of states and governments, dear delegates, thank you for your statements. And this brings us to the end of the high-level segment. The joint third meeting of COP28, CMP 18 and CMA 5 is now adjourned. Distinguished delegates, the conference will now hear two special messages. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Teo Chi Hin, Senior Minister, Coordinating Minister for National Security, delivering a message of His Excellency Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, Prime Minister of Singapore. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this distinguished gathering. Mr. President, amid heightened geopolitical and economic turbulence, the world is on a pathway to 2.1 to 2.8 degrees centigrade of global warming by 2100. The first global stocktake presents an opportunity for the world to course correct to keep the target of 1.5 degrees centigrade within reach. Singapore reaffirms its commitment to domestic climate action, regional partnerships, and global collaboration. First, domestic climate action. Singapore is a small island state, like the speakers before me. We are just 40 kilometers east to west, 25 kilometers north to south, and our 5.6 million people have nowhere else to go if sea levels rise. So we have to take this very seriously. Singapore raised its climate ambition last year to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. We are now focusing our efforts on implementation and delivering progress. We will raise our carbon tax level to around $19 per ton of emissions in 2024 and progressively to $37 to $60 per ton by 2030, making it one of the highest in Asia. We have mandated zero population vehicle growth, since 2018. And our vision is for all vehicles to run on cleaner energy by 2040. In spite of being alternative energy disadvantaged, Singapore is sparing no effort in greening our power sector. We are already halfway towards achieving our 2030 solar deployment target. From 2024, we will also require all new and repowered natural gas power plants to be at least 30% hydrogen compatible by volume. Second, regional partnerships. We must foster partnerships and channel finance to accelerate regional decarbonization. At COP28, Singapore will announce Financing Asia's Transition Partnerships, or FAST-P, a new blended finance initiative that aims to mobilize up to $5 billion in finance. FAST-P will bring together public and private sector platforms and partners to de-risk and finance transition and marginally bankable green projects in Asia. As a first step towards a joint vision of an ASEAN power grid, Singapore plans to import around 4 gigawatts of low-carbon electricity from the region by 2015. We must also collaborate to strengthen our collective global climate resilience. Singapore participates actively in partnerships to advance flood, water, and heat resilience, as well as coastal and flood protection. To support mutual learning, Singapore will share our regional climate projections based on IPCC's 6th assessment project report. Third, global collaboration. Multilateralism at platforms such as UNFCCC remains key to ensuring a just and inclusive transition. Singapore is pleased to support the following initiatives: the Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge, Early Coal Retirement Initiative, and Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership. We stand at a critical crossroads. Let us face climate change not as individual nations, but instead seize this opportunity to unite, act, and deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Cho Hang-sik, Special Envoy delivering a message of His Excellency Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol, President of the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to participate in the World Climate Action Summit as the Special Presidential Envoy on behalf of President Yoon Suk-yeol of the Republic of Korea. As the IPCC report has warned us, without our swift action, the goal of Paris Agreement will be forever unattainable. The future of humanity hinges on us gathered here at COP. To tackle the global climate crisis, the Republic of Korea would like to make 3 proposals. Firstly, we need to fully incorporate the result of the global stocktake into our future actions. No single country can tackle the challenge of climate change alone. Yet each nation's decision-making carries a weight in finding the solution. Each of our nations must make the fight against climate change the #1 national priority. The GST is the compass that tells us how far we have come to reach our destination of 1.5 degrees Celsius goals of the Paris Agreement. Travelers ignore the guidance of the compass at their own peril. All of us are accountable for the results of GST, and based upon the GST results, we should step up our climate action with a strong sense of urgency and responsibility. Secondly, our climate action should be sustainable and inclusive. In our race of climate action, some may be ahead of others, while some may lag behind. However, the race will never be over until the very last one crosses the finish line. In this regard, Korea sincerely welcomes the adoption of the decision on the loss and damage funds operationalization. This clearly shows that we can make all the difference if we work together, and speaks volumes about our global solidarity. It is imperative that we continue strengthening our collective efforts to tackle the climate crisis, fostering the spirit of cooperation and unity. Based upon our own experience of economic development, Korea strives to play an active role in resolving the gaps in climate action. Korea will continue its role of laying the green ladder to help vulnerable developing countries respond to the climate crisis. To that end, the Korean government had already pledged to significantly increase our green ODA by 2025. In addition, Korea has pledged to contribute additional $300 million for GCF's second replenishment. Lastly, we suggest that climate action should be effective and realistic. The world is undergoing multiple crises. That is why tackling the climate crisis calls for the most realistic and effective way. The key, we believe, is in energy transition driven by advanced climate technologies. Last September, President Yoon proposed the formation of the Carbon-Free Alliance as a realistic solution for countries to reach carbon neutrality. This initiative calls for utilizing all carbon-free clean energy sources in addition to renewables, depending upon each country's circumstances and conditions. We look forward to your support for this initiative. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the fight against climate change will never be successful if you do not join all our forces. We have no time to stay idle. We do not have the luxury to meander. We must go forward as our compass leads us. The Republic of Korea will strive to lead this pathway. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Distinguished delegates, this brings us to the end of the session. Thank you. I wish you all a nice afternoon.